and that's in the key of E. So basically, the module in this instance is telling us to push onto the 4th fret, and probably what may have happened, I'm not saying it did, but where all these people were practicing going just onto the 4th fret, they just basically started making songs, just getting from one position to the 4th fret and making a song. And you can hear this in this type of sequence. So what's happening basically is that the bass is starting to evolve into some of the stuff that we recognise from the 60s, and even with the rock and roll guys, you know, or the jazz guys, you know, they're going to starting to substitute as well. And if you sort of like hear things in D, you know, they're just playing it without hardly any movement. So basically what could be happening is that more and more people are starting to play music, and because not all of them know the whole rudiments of playing on the bass, they're using a lot more substitution in order to play something similar, but not knowing everything inside. So, and this seems to be the case. And in England, with the famous, quite really known bass player Paul McCartney, he was in a band, and they also started to incorporate a lot of substitution and using some of the new things that were considered to be soul music in their early compositions. And if we go into the key of D that we were just playing earlier, where we were just sort of like, you know, just going through it, you know, they started to realise that, you know, that they could do the same, and they came out with something like come on baby now, twist and shout. So music's going all over the world, and people are using substitution instead of the full rudiments in order to get their songs out, and people are beginning to like it because it's starting to sound a little bit different than having to wait, say like in rock and roll tunes where you're actually listening to the whole cadence and the whole chords to go round back to the beginning. Now they're just using just a few notes. It's starting to sound a little bit more with just the substitutions, and it's starting to sound like the music's got a lot more suspense. And with some of the soul guys now, they can start to express themselves vocally with having this suspense of not knowing when the chord change is going to happen. And even the rock and roll guys, they're starting to move away now, where you start to hear sort of like a Latin type of feel coming into the thing. So there's all these different types of beats that are starting to happen on the same sequences, and some of the guys now are pushing into soul, And when we're looking at the G again, some people are starting to push away on that and in the soul music, and even though there was a great big revolution in Britain with Paul McCartney's band and other bands, the Americans were starting to evolve themselves. And if we look at the G major thing again, what happens is that someone comes up with a novel idea of actually changing that sequence into and I'm a soul guy, and I don't want to get too emotional, but that was really an important step in music and the electric bass. So as you can see now, in the 60s, people are beginning to really like using full fret. And the music's starting to change from the jazz into the soul. And because people are now starting to use electric bass, these riffs become much more easier to play. And because it's fretted, if someone comes up to you and says play the 11th fret, you just go 11th fret, done. Well, what string do you want it? Oh, I want it on the A string, done. Whereas if you're on a double bass, you've got to go through all this rocket science to find out whether that's the right note. Oh, that's it. And so now the young guys, the teenagers, are rushing out to get electric basses because they're basically what everybody else seems to be playing. But the reason why a lot of people are starting to play with the electric basses is because you can find the positions without having to use loads of rocket science of tuning up and actually trying to tune the string to get there. And without going into too much detail, the only bass line that I'm focusing on the diary is the Sam Cooke bass line. And I'll show you that in the next part of the diary, because it becomes so important in the electric bass and super funk.